All right, so I went ahead and I made up four of these. Um, these are the cheapest of the cheap bearings. Like, I mean, two bearings came with the tire for $6, rim, hub, everything, right? So I, the wrong size. There were 5 thou under, which isn't really a big thing, but I've been putting for as much as this build is going to cost me. Like I've already spent a lot of money, and this is kind of a foundational thing. So I'm not going to use these bearings. I went up head in for like $16. I could order a little bit better quality bearing. Um, that's a 5/8 and inch and 3/8 on the outside. So it's not I'm taking me all that much more. I have some more of this heavy wall tubing. So really I only have to bore out like an eighth of an inch on this. So there's no sense in not doing it right, just to save myself not much time. I don't know if I ever covered it, but being well stocked is definitely a valuable thing. So, whenever I need some material, I always buy a little bit more so that I can stock up and have things on hand for the, you know, offhand projects or midnight things, or if, I'm glad I just have this kind of thing weighing around. Um, so I'm going to cut off some pieces of this. I like this width, so I'll probably keep that. And then we'll bore it out and put his bearings in. All right, so this is a little stupid. I used my corner clamp, I mean it's a real one. It's a big heavy duty cast iron thing. Um, and but they ended up just a little bit sprung. So doing a frame just with the corner clamp is not enough to get a nice I mean the 90s right, but they were just tweaked just a tiny little bit over that much of a length where they weren't sitting flush. I probably had like an eighth of an inch spring if I pushed down on one corner. So I had to go through and cut my welds across the top and down. Luckily, I didn't do it on the inside yet. So now I have it sitting flush. Everything's right. I had to cut all four corners to get it to align. All right, so here is the part of the process where I don't know if I have words for it. You know, I go off intuition. This is the part I enjoy the most, is determining like scale and strength of the materials. And, you know, I'm faithfully drawing on a lot of experience here, working as a mechanic for a bunch of years, doing a lot of machine work, seeing how things fail, seeing what works. So, my frame scale, the frame width was set by, I want the tires to be slightly outside the pallet. They don't have to be much more than that, but they do have to be outside the pallet. Frame length is basically a matter of leverage. How much weight is going to be hanging out the front? How much weight do I expect from the back as ballast? So this frame seems like a good scale for what I'm going for. Now I'm setting mast width, right? And I want my pilot forks to be fairly wide. I want, if they're too close together, then the load could be tippy. So basically, we want our pallet forks pretty far out there. But I still want to be able to go into the pallet without a fight, right? So you need at least, like, if I don't know, the edge of the pallet fork is probably where I want the edge of the mast right now, which means I'm probably going to make the mast even a little bit wider than it is now. So I'm a little bit short on this material. I was going to send it across as a cross member. So we'll do something else there. But, a matter of figuring out the sizes of things and estimating. Like I like to mock things up, and then I can kind of see what's going on. I can imagine the forces, and I can imagine them a whole lot easier when I have some kind of mock-up in place. And then I can kind of extrapolate on, oh, there's going to be a problem, or, oh, that's going to work. So this is the way I like to design, is kind of in the moment as I get the pieces together. Also, we can't forget we need some kind of bearing out here for a cadet. So we got to leave enough space. So we've kind of rough cut a couple of pieces of the sheet metal to fall off using our disc cutter. And then for our mast, we went through and drilled a bunch of holes. We're going to try to plug weld that. It'll have to be clamped really good so that there's no variations in it for the bearing to run smooth. I mean, it'll still have play, but I want it to run as smooth as possible. And then for the cross member, I didn't have two pieces of aught, so And sometimes it was about the same size. So I'll just try to clamp those down good, weld them together. That'll give me my right distance. It's 10 3/4 on the inside. And I cut out a little notch here that'll get welded into. So we have our little piece of shim clamped in really good. And I've gone through and I've done a bunch of little spot welds. We can see I also added a countersink in there. That way I could get to the root of the weld easier without, otherwise the wire might get hung up on the top layer. All right, so we had the beginning of our mast in place. This bottom was a little bit springy. I think it's probably with stuff. Clearly I should have used that because it's a little sturdier, but whatever. We're going to have a bar that goes across and bolts in from both sides to maintain the correct spacing at the top so they can't flex out. My way I can still lower my carriage down in. This is as close as I come to like a welding table because I don't even have floor space for what I have. So I'll go let this cool down. Everything's flat now. All right. I've decided to go with kind of a height of the throat. I'm just going to use like a plug of the 3/4, turn it down a bit and enough of a length so that it won't have much of a tweak to it. And then I can put the bearing on, and this back rim of the tubing will be, make it square against the bearing so that the bearing can't keep going down the shaft. And that way I don't lose the extra distance, the inside, so I can weld my forks, potentially all the way up to about here. A little bit closer than I could otherwise. Plus, I'll save these for another project. I don't specifically need them for this. And the shim stock, like a 1,000 shim stock, put this on pretty tight and made it so that the bearing was actually working and not just spinning or man and race. All right, so we got our 4 bearing blocks bored out with a nice finish on them. Then we got a flattened L bottom, and that'll just make it easier to line maze and weld them on and give us more surface area where I don't have to like get too tight into the roof. They don't roll around on me. So next, what we're going to do, before I can figure out how the mast is going to mount and how low it has to be below the frame and how much I have to drop the forks, I'll need the carriage complete and I'll need the wheels mounted. So that way I know how high the frame sits up off the ground. All right, so we have our carriage carefully aligned and clamped. Drilled the little hole so I could get a good clamping thing. I think that'll work out good for me. Next, we're going to start at motor alignment. Not so for the motors that I used. These are pretty powerful. These are a maker motor off of Amazon. And it's kind of like a customized wiper motor with, a solid output shaft. Now, I have used regular wiper motors. These were $63 a piece. So I did not skimp on these, and they're expensive. I didn't want to skimp on power. And I could have used like a $25 wiper motor. But the problem is they don't have good output shafts. Like they have like a taper and a nurdled section. And you almost always end up with some kind of wobble on them. And for this application, I didn't want any kind of wobble. And so I splurged. I spun out just to make my life a little bit easier later on. Now, these didn't come in right and left, but these are all, I suppose it'd be a right-hand motor. So one side is going to mount easy. And then the other side, I have to figure out what orientation I want. I don't really want this hanging. I could have this hanging below the frame, but you can see that I'm going to lose too much. I'm going to lose 3.5 inches, 4 inches. And my tire, if that's centered, I'm now down to I don't know, 1.5 inches, 2 inches of clearance. That's probably fine, but I don't know. I'm going to leave myself the opportunity to do it. And really the difference is how far back into the frame we space these things, right? Obviously I want my tires pretty close to the front, so I don't end up with any extra leverage that I don't have to ooze. But I definitely want enough room so that I can handle different orientations of the motor without a problem later on. So I'll figure out my spacing, how far back I dare go, how far back I want to go. Um, and we're starting to just kind of look at everything, see how it aligns. So for alignment of these pieces, I'm going to go with 3 inches back from the corner. And just kind of by eye, I marked the center of these and I carried the line around. And I'm only using a marker width. It's not the most precise, but because these are each independent, it doesn't entirely matter, and I don't want to get too fuzzy. So I'm lining them up. I'm centering them half and half. That one, I guess, still needs to come over a little bit. And I'm then clamping it, and then I'm taking a square, measuring there for alignment. All right, so we have our carriage all welded up. This is smooth, so smooth. There is not as much play as I figured could be in it. I should let it move smooth without binding. So we've gone ahead and we've welded on all of our bearing mounts. You can see I have like a little split ring in there. Now, it was easier just to bore these straight through. Otherwise, I would have had to rechuck it if I were to only bore in a little bit and then flip it over and bore him in order to get it concentric. It would have taken a lot more time. So basically, I just took a piece of tubing. It was bigger than I needed. It was bigger. You're not going to find the tubing that fits exactly in there, really. So I just sliced out a little portion, squeezed it in the vise a little bit, and now it goes in there, and it's quite secure. It's quite tight that you can still move it by hand. So that's going to give the bearings the proper spacing, so that they don't, so that they'll sit flush with the face. Now, in order to absorb the thrust, if there's any, I don't want my little motor back here absorbing all the thrust if the tire tries to walk itself out around a corner or something or push in. So I'm going to try to absorb it all right in this frame. And the old bearings were all flange bearings, and I really wish that the flange bearings had worked out for this, because then I wouldn't have had to do any of what I'm about to tell you, including this little piece inside. But it didn't work out that way. So I just ended up with, some regular straight bearings. So I have to come up with a way to absorb the thrust. So basically what's going to happen is that little spacer in there is going to give them a whip. So they'll push in, then they'll be flush with this face. And then I have some of these big washers, and you can see I've already ground off the plating on them. So I'll put the bearing in there, and then I'll just put the face on, and then I'll just give it just a tiny tack on each side. And that will complete the bearing mount. And then the bearings can't go in and they can't come out, right? So all the thrust will be absorbed. And then on the axle, I'll just have a little spacer that goes right through this hole and can push me in a race so that I don't need like a separate thrust bearing or anything. Yeah, they're not going to be huge forces working on it this way, but there will be some, so I need to account for it. As far as these little brackets, what I did, I was going to take some gussets and carve them out, but it was a big pain in the ass. So really, this stuff's small enough that I could just take the bolt cutters and cut it to size. And, I have a in a second. Also, that flat up here gave me a perfect place in order to weld on the inside and outside. So I don't think we're on a master going anywhere. So bearings are pretty much done. Hopefully none of them need to be moved because it won't be fun. So I guess that's it for this part of the video. The next stage is to work on the axles themselves and the motor modes. And then we're almost moving.